Hello all. In this video we're going to take a look at the conditional statement in Python. You've learned a little bit about Boolean expressions. How do we use them? Well, this is one of the major uses. We'll take a look at some examples of different kinds of if statements, simple ones, maybe a nested one. Maybe we'll take a look at certainly multi-part if statements, and just get you a sense of how these if statements, these conditionals, work. I'll remind you again that this is how we can write a program that makes choices, that behaves differently under different circumstances. And that's a fundamental tool that we need in any programming language. So it's really just, how does Python manage this? All right, so what you can see here in the notes is the general form for an if statement. So you have as the first line, you have the keyword if. And then again, I'll remind you, this part that's in angled brackets, this is just my putting in a placeholder. What that means is put a Boolean expression here. So you have the word if followed by a Boolean expression and then a colon at the end of the line. After that line, you have an indented section. This is a conditional, or sometimes we call it a selection operator. What it means is we selectively perform the statements that are indented. We don't always do it. If the test expression is true, then we perform the indented statements that follow it. If the test expression is false, we go on to whatever comes afterwards and we skip those statements. Now this shows more complicated parts you can add on to an if statement in several different ways, but I'm going to switch over to PyCharm and we're going to try some examples. All right, so we're going to go back to our x, y, and z that we had before. Suppose that I want to change y to be no bigger than z. I need to know whether or not y is bigger than z, so I can write an if statement to do that. So I'd say if, and then a Boolean expression that needs to say, is y bigger than z? Y greater than z will do that. That's enough. That's the only Boolean expression I need. And then I put a colon, and when I hit the enter key, the return key, it indents automatically for me because it knows there's supposed to be an indented section here. You need to have at least one statement inside here. What I'm going to do is to set y equal to z. And then they'll just print x, y, and z at the end. So this is the most simple, shortest kind of if statement. It has if, it has an indented section, and then nothing else. There's no extra add-on segments to the if statement. It's also a fairly easy one to work with. All right, let's try this. We'll run this. What we should get is that y gets set to 75. Yes, so x stayed at 50. Y was changed to 75 because it was greater than z before. Suppose that I make it small. If y is 10 and z is 75, this Boolean expression will evaluate to false, and so the code should skip the indented section and go on to the next statement after that. And it does. So now y has not changed because it only changes when it's greater than z. All right, that's our most basic, most simple kind of if statement. The next thing that you can do is not actually this elif, although that is an option that we could do, but you can add on an else statement, which is what to do if the first or preceding test or tests have not been true. So it's like a default response. So I'm going to go over to our code and I'll show you how I can extend what we had to add on an else section to it. All right, so if y is greater than z, we set y to be z. I'm going to add then an else. Notice that the word else is indented the same as the if. It has no test after it. It just says else and then colon. That's because this is the default. If you get here, it's going to do the indented section that comes afterward. If you've done an earlier section, once you do one section of an if, it skips to the end of the if statement and goes on from there. So in this case, if y is greater than z, I'm going to set y to be z, and otherwise I'm going to set z to be y. So now z changes in this case. The first test was false, so we went to the else and we did this line instead, and we changed z to be 10 from 75. Things to remember about else's: else does not have a test. It doesn't have a Boolean expression that goes along with it. It's just if you get here in the if statement and none of the other tests have been true, then it's going to do this else part. All right, so going back here, we have the elif, which is the additional one. This allows us to extend our Boolean expressions as far as we want. We can have one test expression and then another and then another and then another, as many as you need to have. And then you can follow it with an else at the end. All right, so I'm switching back to Python. I've deleted what we had before, except for the print statement at the end. And now I'm just going to do an elif. So if x is less than y, we're going to print x. Otherwise, we're going to ask another question. If y is less than z, then we're going to print y. If x is less than z, then we're going to print x, else print z. So this is kind of complicated and it's a little bit nonsensical. The idea is just to show you how you can structure this if statement. So what would happen is I run this. I initialize the variables, I come to the if statement. It's going to check the first one. Is x less than y? I should actually adjust this so we can see the variables too. No, that's not the case. So it will skip that first indented section and come to this elif, and it will ask the second question. Is y less than z? Yes. Y is less than z, so it will print y, and then it will skip to the end of the if statement and go on to whatever follows. So it won't ever ask about the x less than z, and it won't get to the else. So it prints the 10. I could have it print the string instead, which might be more helpful, or both. There. So now when I run it, I can actually tell which line printed y10. That's the case that was true. Suppose that we set y back to 100. We had that before. Is x less than y? Ooh, now it is. So now x50 prints, and it skips all the other cases. If I set y to be 150, x is not less than y is not less than z, x is not less than z. So we come to the else and we print z. So you see how this works? I'm actually not sure if there's a case where this would actually happen, but we'll assume that that might be the case. So we have this big if elif. You can build it as deep as you want. You can also build conditional statements that nest inside, one inside the other, as much as you prefer. So I could, as a way of finding, let's say I want to find the largest value in these three. I could say if x is less than y, then x is clearly not the largest. So y or z would be the largest. So then inside, in the indented part, I can ask another question. If y is less than z, then print Z is largest. All right, if y is not less than z, which is the case when I do the else, then y is the largest. All right. If x is not less than y, then x might be the largest, but it's still the case that z might also be the largest. So I'm going to have a similar if statement in here. If x is less than z, then print z is largest. Else print x is largest. I have two cases where z is the largest, but that's okay. Notice that the indentation here has to be absolutely perfect. This if and this else have to be indented to the same point. So does this if and this else. And the others should be indented all at the same level as well. Let the editor help you with this. Try not to move the values, the statements if you can, so that it stays okay. All right, so what we should hope for here is that x gets printed as the largest, right? Yes, x 150 is largest. How did that come about? X is not less than y, so we go to the else, and then we come in here and ask another question. Is x less than z? No. So we go to the else here, and we print x is largest. You could test this out and make sure that it works for all different possible orderings. It should. This should actually work fairly well for telling us which of these three values was largest. All right, I hope this has given you a sense for what conditionals look like. It'll take a little practice to figure out how to write them effectively, and we'll try to start small and build up toward more complex uses of them over time. Thank you very much. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you very soon.